Across the Margin. Across the Margin podcast. Welcome to Across the Margin, the podcast, where we take you beyond the margin, behind the scenes of the online magazine, and deeper into the stories. I'm your host, Michael Shields, and I'm really excited for this podcast. It's a wild one. It is an extravaganza of sorts, as you hear me often these days as episodes are just getting underway, speaking about the Osiris Podcast Network, and urging you to go to osirispod.com to check all the offerings available from Osiris. In episode 43, I spoke on the Osiris podcast that lie outside the musical realm, from the great road to now, to the fun and often deeply affecting Daddy Unscripted, to the party that is Fear of a Craft Beer Planet, to the informative podcasts that are State of the Garden and Sharing a Sauna, to the hilarious Which is Better, and to the film and television-centric Welcome to the Party, Pal. But while the Osiris Arts and Culture and Comedy podcast and their offerings continue to swell and thrive in their own varied ways, it is no secret that Osiris's specialty, its unparalleled strength, is its music podcast. And I'm here today to talk about and introduce you to all of them. This episode features interviews, kind of micro interviews of sorts, with podcasters deeply passionate about music. And throughout it, I will be shining a light on podcasts that specialize in jazz, indie and psychedelic rock, bluegrass, and much more. And easily the best Phish, Grateful Dead, and Ween podcast you are going to find anywhere. So one last thing before I just get these things rolling, because we got a bunch of them. I like to say that Osiris is much more than just the podcast that make up, that we're going to be talking about today. It is, at its heart, it's a media company. So as things get moving with Osiris, it's still a very young project. Expect a lot of news about live experiences. Expect a lot of streams, a lot of video of different sorts, and all that is coming soon. But in the meantime, the podcast at its foundation are pretty incredible. So let's get into it. First up, I'd like to talk about the Helping Friendly podcast. It was founded by host RJB and Brad Tenbrook, and also features two other hosts, Jonathan Hart and Matt Dwyer. It is a podcast that since 2013 has sought to analyze and discuss the music of Phish, talking to fans about their experiences and the music that surround them. RJ, it must be noted, is one of the founders with Tom Marshall of Osiris Media Group, and Tom will be talking about a little bit later as well. But the Helping Friendly Pod, it's an amazing resource for Phish fans to share ideas and experiences and to learn more about the band and the music. So I had a chance to catch up with Brad to learn more about the Helping Friendly podcast, and here is our discussion. Brad, thank you very much for joining me today and joining in on this Osiris podcast. I love the podcast. I've been listening to it for a while as a Phish fan, and I was wondering if you could tell the listeners here a little bit about the Helping Friendly podcast, what it is, and how it came to be.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. You're doing a great service for all of us involved with Osiris, and your podcast itself is fits in well. I really like it too. So thanks.
Awesome.
Again.
No, thank you for those kind words. I appreciate it. Proud to be a part of the team as well.
Good. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Me too. So the Helping Friendly podcast was, I think we just had our fifth anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
We started in July of 2013. RJ and I had been talking just kind of getting into podcasts. I guess, we were into them, but not like too deep. And we both really liked this Grateful Dead podcast. It was short and simple. I've talked about it a lot. This guy, he calls himself a professor, runs the Dead Pod, and it's him talking for literally 3 minutes. He then says, I'm going to play set 1 or set 2 of the following show. Here's the set list, and then he plays it, and then you hear the half the show, and then the podcast ends. And I loved it because it came out every Friday.
Nice.
It still does, I think.
Yeah.
And RJ and I would always talk, like, Friday afternoon, did you listen to the Dead Pod? So then, of course, naturally, we start talking about the Phish.
Yeah.
And, I can't believe I can't find one that's similar to the Dead Pod for Phish.
That's what I was going to ask. Was there much
Yeah.
out at that time when you were, when you were conceiving this? I don't think there was many Phish podcasts out there.
No, there wasn't. So Type 2 Cast, run by Stephen Oker, who's he's a photog now, like just a pro at what he does. He's a really great guy. I think Josh Korn too, and a couple other guys, but they went on hiatus like not long before we started the Helping Friendly podcast, and they were more like playing jam clips,
okay,
and then kind of talking about them, analyzing them, I was looking for shows. Just because it's also, as you're a Phish fan, it's hard to what show am I going to listen to today?
Totally.
You then either go back to something you've already listened to because you love it so much, or you just kind of get lost. And,
we're talking 3 decades worth of material at this point.
Right, exactly. So it's 1,600 shows, 1,700 shows.
Unbelievable.
So, anyway, so we just started, and we're like, well, let's just do a whole show. We'll talk about it, and we went from there. And literally the first show we did, I was on an iPad and earbuds and had a script. We were reading and nervous and, we had to figure out how the hell to get it on the Apple and,
totally.
All that stuff that comes with it. But it was really exciting and we got a pretty good following. Phish Twitter is a pretty serious business.
It's no joke, especially it's the tour just started yesterday, and Phish Twitter is on fire, and it's like Phish Twitter on steroids right now.
Yeah, it's really fun. But so we got the word out pretty quickly via Phish Twitter, and that was exciting, and we got a pretty good response. And so now we're 140 episodes deep of Phish, basically Phish only content. We've had some kind of one-offs or interviews with authors and that kind of stuff, which is really fun.
Totally.
But we've kind of grown into this, we're Phish specific, but we're also willing to delve into, anything kind of along those lines. And that's kind of when RJ put together the Osiris idea, in that, we should get a lot of podcasts together that are similar but not the same.
Yep.
And that's, we've got live music and culture and, The Road to Now, which you've interviewed them, and your podcast, where it's just not only about music. So it's turned into a dream almost, in that, a lot of RJ's hard work has resulted in this great network of great people. So,
which is awesome. And I feel like while it's coming together now and there's already a grouping of podcasts, it still feels like the beginning in so many ways. I mean, there's so much that I believe can really come from this, whether it's live experiences or different ways that we can share ideas, music, and culture. It really feels like it's getting off the ground, and that's really exciting.
Yeah, it's fun in that you don't realize how many people have similar interests.
Yeah. When
you're within your own familial bubble or whatever.
Absolutely.
But another reason I love going to live shows too, because any live show, you get to see people who will probably have similar interests. So
exactly.
I agree that this is it's still kind of in the infancy. I mean, we've been around for months now, but Osiris is growing.
Yeah. And
I know it can grow because our silly little Helping Friendly podcast grew into a pretty well recognized podcast. I'm not trying to toot my own horn, obviously, but we've put the time and effort in, and
it's paying off. No question about it. Let's talk guests for a moment, as you guys do an amazing job of involving so many intriguing parts of the community and highlight all the unique people who contribute a whole bunch to this larger whole. Who have you spoke to recently, and who have you had on? And what type of guest could listeners expect at the Helping Friendly Pod?
So, in the beginning, and something we still try to focus on, we're getting just kind of fans, you know what I mean? Just people who like the band and just want to talk about it and banter and, back and forth about specific experiences. And we've had, the Phish lyricist, Tom Marshall, who's part of the Osiris, he was on our, probably right around episode 80 or 85, he was a guest, and that was really...
That must have been pretty special at that time.
Yeah, a huge hurdle for us to have someone so close to the band, who's now a good friend, and he's just a great guy.
Oh, he's amazing,
right, so he was a big name, but we've had authors who've written, like Alan Paul, he's written a lot about the Allman Brothers, but also wrote, I think for the Journal maybe, about Phish, did a story about, and he wanted to talk with us, and hey, let's turn this into an interview, and we did. That was wonderful.
Cool. Yep.
So anywhere from just a fan who's like us to somebody who's got a bigger voice or whatever. But those are the guys who come right off the top, thinking about it.
Yeah.
And since, as you know, since we started RJ and I, Jonathan and Matt, who are now part of the team.
Yep.
And are integral to the podcast. I mean, they're wonderful guys, but they provide a ton for it. And Jonathan does a Dead podcast, and Matt is a sound guru. So we've got two more guys too at the Helping from the podcast. So
yeah, you got a strong team over there. Yeah, I talked to Jonathan's going to come up later in this podcast for Broke Down Pod. We discussed it already, but So
and also, let me jump in.
Please.
Also, we do these quick hits.
I was going to get there. That's where I was kind of going.
Yeah,
Go on. Yep.
Sorry. No. We when shows, when tours in full swing like it is now, the morning after a show, we always try to get somebody who was there on for just a quick 15-minute, 20-minute kind of like Sports Center highlight podcast where we can talk about what went on in the set list and what stood out, and also the scene. Yeah. Which I think is also going to come out. We're doing Osiris live, and RJ and Tom are at Tahoe right now, and before the second night of Tahoe, they're going to do a little live stream from the parking lot, I think, or maybe the venue, and just kind of go over the scene and what's going on, and maybe the previous night, and just kind of let people in who are couch touring.
So that'll be going on all summer, right? At the YouTube channel is Osiris YouTube channel. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yep. Subscribe to the Osiris YouTube channel. We've already had stuff from the Delfest, stuff from Sweetwater 420.
Yep.
Kind of video highlight sort of interviews, that kind of stuff. But this should be live on the channel. That'll pop up. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And that should hopefully all summer, and not only for Phish. Hopefully, obviously we're going to try to expand it.
Great. So things definitely step up when tours in season as it is now.
That's right.
So, all right, cool. Well, I just also wanted to say, thank you for what you guys do for the community. You do a great job of shining a light on not only how special Phish is, which we know all too well, but how special so many of the people in the community are, and just all the how multifarious the whole thing is. It's an excellent podcast, and I'm happy to talk about it tonight. So I really appreciate it, Brad. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, man. And I think what I left out, and sorry to ramble on.
I want you to.
So one of the things I left out in the beginning was also just kind of the community aspect of it all.
Yeah.
And getting people together. For example, obviously we've met a ton of people that we may not have otherwise met, who are so interesting and so excited about Phish, just like we are, but also do other things. So it's fun to learn from other people. And in 2015, when Magnaball was going on at Watkins Glen, the weekend fest for Phish, we got to see so many people there who would have been there anyway, but we wouldn't have known them but for the podcast. So that part alone is worth it. And as you know from being a Phish fan, the community is just, it's half the experience. Music is half, and I think the community is the other half.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, and you guys do a good job of kind of pulling it together and being a tie that binds in a way, which is really, really cool and necessary.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah.
All right. So thanks again, Brad. Okay, so check out the Helping Friendly podcast. And next up, I'd like to talk about God, Ween, Evan. God, Ween, Evan is a podcast celebrating the American rock and roll band Ween and one man's refusal to open his heart, mind, and soul to the band. Basically, what the podcast amounts to is three of the funniest comedians I know in Paul Gakowski, Katie Hartman, and Will Nunziata teaming up on another brilliant comedian, Evan Kaufman, and trying to get him to understand and eventually, hopefully, like Ween. Not only is the podcast hilarious, but it's a great way to get into Ween. Or, if you're a diehard fan, it's a great way to learn more about the band and their awesome catalog. So, over at God, Ween, Evan, I am affectionately known, I hope, as producer Mikey, as I do produce that show. And so I sat down with the rest of the God, Ween, Evan team to discuss, how the podcast came about and everything about it. And this is what came of it. All right, God, Ween, Evan team, thank you for taking some time here to talk to me. I wanted to shine a light on this show as part of the Osiris Music podcast preview, so I appreciate it.
What?
I'm curious.
Oh no, it started so poorly.
Right, we're off and running at least. But I'm curious how this came about. How did you three, we'll start with you three, decide you wanted to put Evan through this ringer, and kind of what's the premise behind this?
Oh, well, I think it started with the 100 Days of Ween on Facebook. That I think it's one of those, we've talked about this on the podcast, where it's like parallel thinking, or where we like all wanted Evan to like Ween for different reasons. I think Katie, because of the Tenacious D, their shared love for Tenacious D. And I think Evan and I just thought, that Will and I just thought Evan would like it. Like, where we all thought he would like it.
Genuinely.
Yeah, he should like it because he likes comedy.
Yeah, we're all comedians.
Yeah.
And we all like music, so why doesn't Evan like Ween?
But actually, when we found out he really didn't like it, then it was just more fun for us.
Yeah, then it was like the torture side of it, and it also felt, for me, when we were doing the 100 Days of Ween, where we were like genuinely posting songs on his Facebook page that we thought he would like.
We were flooding his Facebook page with Ween songs.
I don't even think we did one a day.
Yeah.
It's not that.
For 1,000 days.
Yeah.
Not over the top.
Well, 100 days turned into 1,000 days. And then because he was like abjectly
rejecting it,
that just made us want him more.
Yeah, so we stopped posting on his Facebook, and then we forced him to come into this room and listen to Ween songs.
And voila, God, Ween, Evan,
Here we are.
right there. So, Evan, when they kind of approached you for this, how's it going for you? How did you come to the point where you were willing to subject yourself to this, and how do you feel it's going so far?
Well, I'm desperate to be liked. So when anyone offers me any sort of project or any sort of thing to do, I always feel like I have to say yes. If I said no, would these people still be friends with me?
No.
I value their friendship.
We definitely took advantage of that.
Oh yeah.
So I'm kind of weak.
Still am.
Weak in that respect. I do think when something is posted on your Facebook wall over and over and over again, I kind of ignore most internet-based things, and also if people are suggesting things to me, for the most part, I'll try it out. And like when I was listening to Ween, I was just like, I don't get it. You know, that thing you're just listening to it in your house, and I'd listen to like 30 seconds of a song, and just because I tried when they were posted, I was like, well, they're taking the time. I might as well try and listen to these things.
Did you try?
I did, but it was like my body rejected it. You know, like having an allergy, or someone's like,
How dramatic of you.
Yeah. It's like when somebody's like, try.
Like a fucking kidney transplant.
Yeah. My body just wasn't accepting it. It's like somebody's like, oh, I love oysters. Like, you should try oysters. And then you eat an oyster and you're like, oh, no.
You don't fucking like oysters?
Well, I've come around on oysters, but, but I have a history.
Like, a little bit like a band I know.
Oh, boy.
I sense a new podcast, Oysters Coffin.
Yeah. I kind of...
It's like a vaudevillian.
It's just him slurping oysters for 40 minutes all night.
Tonight on the main stage, Oysters Kaufman.
With the mascot, of course.
I've also had a long history of not liking things that people like. Having to just having to deal with that. Like, I've never been a coffee drinker or liked beer, and those are two like pillars of the beverage community,
Especially for being a man, quote unquote.
quote unquote.
I spit coffee out.
Yeah.
Made me laugh.
Yeah, which is what
Yeah.
which I would do too. So, I was like, am I missing something with Ween? And so when they were like, come and listen to it, and it turns out, so far, I'm not. Well, no, that's not totally true. I feel like I'm coming around a little bit.
Yeah, there's a lot of ups and downs throughout the journey. We're 9 episodes in, and there's times where I'm like, oh my god, he's getting it. And there's times like the first half of episode 9 where I'm like, you guys are not doing your job.
Mikey, producer Mikey was getting, clinched. His fists were clinched in the corner.
Episode ended well with a couple of songs, but there was some strong hate. I mean, he says, I'm not going to talk too much about the Mollusk episode. Go ahead and listen to it. It's one of the best. There's a Mollusk mixed with 2-minute songs. That's episode 9. But it's not taking, still work to be done here, is what I'm
I think
saying.
this song captures the feeling of knowing someone likes something and suggesting something along those lines and having them hate it, which is such a frustrating feeling. I have a friend who he loves comic books, and so you'll suggest like a comic book to him, and then he'll have all these reasons why. He loves baseball, but he hates home runs. You're like, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. And I feel,
National League purist.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, I hate
that designated hitter ruined baseball.
Yeah. So, and I think that's how people feel a little bit sometimes with me when they're like, oh, he likes these things. It's. Let me say this: I'm a very frustrating person to get Christmas gifts for, because people are like, oh, he likes this thing, and then I open it and I'm like, oh, thanks.
It's gonna be like on your headstone.
Yeah.
He was a frustrating man to buy gifts for.
Yeah. But anyway, I've had a great time. I've gotten to eat chocolate. I've gotten to eat cheese, and it's been
pork
fun.
roll
egg and cheese.
Yep.
I mean, the first episode, you basically call us stupid.
Yeah.
Dumb.
Like dumb.
Called us
You called us dumb for liking it.
He
I
did
have
it
to
again
say-
a few episodes later.
Yeah.
He called us stupid like in episode 3.
I don't recall that.
Oh, we got it on tape.
This was pandering music
Jeff
for
Sessions?
drunken idiots.
Wow.
It's on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify.
So if you want to
it's
be
out
liked,
there.
it's hard.
I plead the Donald Trump Jr. on this.
Very similar, you two.
Yeah.
Similar haircuts.
Yeah, in that I don't remember who I colluded with or not, what I said. If there is audio of it, it's probably been manipulated.
Oh,
I
God.
would imagine.
So make America great again and listen to God, Weed, Evan.
Yeah, guys,
Please don't make that our tagline.
Ours is Gwee. God,
Let him in.
Yeah, that's
No,
right.
I'm a fan of the podcast. You know what I like? I always describe it to people as not only is it a chance for Evan to eventually maybe possibly see the light, but it's a great introduction to anyone who wants to know more about Ween and kind of slowly work their way into understanding Ween. You guys do a good job of bringing all their different components to the table. So.
Thanks, Mikey. I'm glad you like it because you have to sit through all
I
of
do
it.
not have to. It's actually it's quite a privilege. I'm a fan
Well,
of
and
the show.
deep down, every Ween fan has tried to get his or her non-Ween friends to
Yeah.
like the band.
Absolutely.
And just
Usually
our
it's
friend
significant.
happens to be a lot funnier than all their friends.
Usually it's a significant other, I find.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Wonder what that's about.
check it out. God, Ween, Evan. Thanks, guys. Appreciate the time.
Thank you,
Thanks, Mikey.
Plug her in.
So check out God, Ween, Evan. Next up, I want to talk about the tour. The tour finds award-winning journalist Ted Canova leading intimate conversations with musicians. For my money, this is one of the most fascinating and well-produced music podcasts there is. I had the chance to talk to Ted briefly about the tour, and this is what came of that conversation. Ted, thank you so much for joining in on this celebration of Osiris. I absolutely love the podcast. It's so fantastic. Can you tell us a little bit?
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Michael.
Of course.
We have this mutual affection towards each other's podcasts. It's a great world we're in.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. We also have something in common with the tagline for your show, or the description mentions how you see 40 shows kind of a year, and might as well combine your love of storytelling and and your passion for music. I can't stop seeing live music myself. But can you tell us a little bit about the tour?
Sure. The tour is something that originated just because I was going to 40 shows a year. And my friend said, by day you're a journalist, by night you are at the stage seeing these amazing bands. We don't know how you get there, but there's some kind of a talent to get there. And I don't give away all my secrets because otherwise they would catch me. But the truth is that I just am so in love with live music, as we all are. It inspires me. It is a way to take a step away from real life, but it's also a way to kind of get re-energized and then return to real life. And I realized that these artists who I interviewed, they've got amazing stories that we all have heard, but I'm trying to get to the stories they haven't shared yet. And I think that by making them feel comfortable face to face and not on the telephone, within a few minutes they open up and they give me these intimate stories that my listeners are just enthralled over. I've got some examples, but we can save that for a little while.
All right, good. Hey, what's your background? I noticed that you worked for NPR for a while.
Yeah, I was a news director at an NPR station and also worked for an NPR program, but a lot of my career is also in commercial television as a news director. So I've been attached to content development my whole career. And you know, you look around and the news is harder and harder to cover and harder to digest.
Absolutely.
So it is such a great reprieve to just immerse myself at some part of my workday into music.
Yeah, smart. Your show is, I mean, it shows that you've been in the business for so long. It is so well produced. It's just, I cannot recommend this podcast more to my listeners. And one of the reasons is your guest. You have amazing guests. And can you speak on some of the guests you've had on already?
I've really been fortunate. I've got to tell you, every one of the people I've interviewed and produced so far, I fall in love with. I fall in love with them as a person. I take a deeper dive into their music. And to tell you the truth, I, for the most part, didn't know the depth that true gigantic fans know of each person, whether it's Amy Helm or Alejandro Escobedo, Craig Fane, Mark Cohn, John Lodge, even Chris Wood and the rest. But some of the things that amaze me is we get so comfortable sitting so close together in this interview that they open up. Alejandro Escobedo shared with me the dialogue of a therapy appointment.
Oh my goodness.
Where his therapist wants to shake him by the lapels and hold him up against the wall and says, "Why do you lie?" And the dialogue on this episode goes for just a couple of seconds, maybe a minute, and it's back and forth of what Alejandro is hiding and why does he lie. It is a real intimate thing that by the end of it, you're just thinking he's going to say, "Please don't use that part."
You're gonna have to cut that part. Yeah.
And then I spoke to Mark Cohn, and he went away for many years, and I said to him, where did you go after winning a Grammy right off the bat? And he goes, "Oh boy, well, now we're getting to the depths of it all." And I said to him, "Have you even talked about those 5 years?" And he said, "You're really one of the first people to ask, and I'm trying to decide if I really want to answer."
Oh my God. So did he go into it?
He went into
Amazing.
it. He went into it. And, it's these kind of stories that are off the beaten trail. It's not just about their lyrics or their inspiration, but it is kind of that human soul of what we die to know about the musicians that we follow. And to tell you the truth, every one of them, have just faced adversity. We know they faced adversity, where they have that negative voice in the head saying, "What are we doing?" Somebody I spoke to the other day, Nassim Curry of a great group I follow, Kingsley Flood. He goes, "I walk around with imposter syndrome." Like, why do I even think I could fill a stadium, let alone fill a bar?
Wow, it's so true. I mean, you mentioned the human element. I mean, you get to see them as people with the insecurities and just exactly who they are. That's amazing.
Yeah, very much so. You know, Jerry Douglas talks about being a 5-year-old with this squeaky voice. And then how does he go on and master the dobro? You know, it's not just singing in his bedroom or performing in his bedroom. These guys have a God-given gift, right? Every one of them. And I've walked away from every one of these interviews more inspired than when I sat down. And to tell you the truth, I like their music even more after listening to them. I'm not sure why. I don't know if I'm a groupie at heart that would just throw it all away and go on tour with every one of them. I know I would. But I just have grown to appreciate their voices, their musical intuition, the obstacles they've overcome, the perseverance of every single one of them that heard the voice in their head saying, I'm not any good, my voice isn't any good, I'm scared stiff, what if people don't show up? And who am I to think that I could get up in front of a crowd and sing my music? And I love every one of them.
Yeah. Well, you know what? That happens not just to you as the interviewee, but the listeners as well. It happens. I mean, it's an increased passion after listening to any of your episodes. Anything on the horizon that you can tell us about? Any the upcoming episodes? Or
I do have this. The head of Kingsley Flood. They're out with a new album. They're one of these groups that you don't know, but you should know.
Okay. You're putting me onto them right now.
Okay, they go from 0 to 100 back to 0 in one song. And you turn to the person next to you on a live show to say, is this really happening? Like you point to the stage, it's like, I always say, do you see what's going on there? And they just nod. And it is this telepathic communication that fans in the audience have when a band takes off. And I ask every one of these musicians, what is it like when a jam goes out of control? And they all have different answers to that. And the childlike aspects of them as human beings comes out when a jam goes out of control. So you'll pick up some of those answers in some of my episodes.
Awesome. Well, again, I love the podcast. Keep at it. I'm going to be on listen to each and every one. And thank you again for coming on the podcast.
Michael, thanks so much. I appreciate it. Good luck.
Thanks. That was Ted Canova, and do yourself a favor and check out the tour. So the tour is a good example of the eclectic variety of music Osiris podcasts have to offer that I spoke about in the introduction. And as is the next podcast I want to talk about, it's the Burning Ambulance podcast, hosted by Phil Freeman, which he describes as a bi-weekly exploration of adventurous and creative music. What Phil brings to the table is his knowledge of jazz and a whole lot of interviews and discussion about jazz and avant-garde music. Take a listen to what he had to say about it. Phil, thank you for being here and joining in on this celebration of all things Osiris. Love the podcast, and can you let us know a little bit about what Burning Ambulance podcast is all about?
Sure. The podcast is an offshoot of the website Burning Ambulance, which I started at the beginning of 2010. Originally, it was a print zine that I was doing, sort of print on demand. I ran about 7 print issues with interviews and features on artists, mostly music focused, but then some other stuff as well from time to time. And then gradually, it moved onto the website. And it's been running ever since. Like, I try and post a piece or two every week, whether it's an album review, an interview with an artist, a gallery of some kind of cool visual things, whatever strikes my interest, and whatever. I have a few people that occasionally contribute other pieces, so whatever they want to write about. Like, I have a guy who does a lot of classical reviews, which is great because I don't know that much about classical music. I listen to it, but I don't have that knowledge base. But he is a guy named Steve Hicken, and he is an actual composer himself. So he has that kind of inside perspective and is able to really write in depth about this stuff.
Fantastic.
So the podcast arose last year basically because I love interviewing artists. But like any other freelance writer, transcription is the bane of my existence.
No question. I completely understand that.
And so I said, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to do the interviews. put the audio out there and, do it that way. And so I looked into it and I said, well, obviously I'm going to need better equipment than I've been using, because I had been recording my interviews for when I was writing a magazine article. I would just use like a little Olympus DM20 that I would put next to the phone and run it on speaker. And so obviously the sound quality would be terrible. So what I wound up doing was buying a Zoom H4n, digital recorder and a couple of microphones. And so now, the iPhone goes directly into the recorder and I get surprisingly good sound quality. But, there's always the variable of the phone connection, but for the most part, it sounds good to me.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought up the website right away, because I was going to push that as well as the podcast. I was there just today reading about King Crimson and a whole bunch of other stuff. So that's really fantastic. But for the podcast, I love your list of guests. I mean, and you really dig deep, and there's a lot of discovery there. It was amazing what I was coming upon. I was wondering if you could tell us about some of the, maybe more recent guests that listeners can come upon on the podcast.
Sure. Well, a couple episodes ago, I did an episode with David Murray, who's a saxophonist who many Osiris listeners may know his name just because, he worked with the Grateful Dead at a certain point and did an entire album of Dead compositions arranged for an octet, which is sort of, as he explains in our interview, is like a small big band. It's like 5 horns, piano, bass, and drums. Yeah. And it's one of his favorite formats. So I really wanted to talk to him about that, because it was it's not a common format. Usually you get 1 or 2 horns at most, but to have 5 is it takes a lot of work. And so that was one that I was really proud of. I also recently interviewed William Parker, who's a bass player on the New York scene, and his wife, Patricia Nicholson, who is the woman who organizes the annual Vision Festival in New York.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
They've been doing that for over 20 years now. Every year they put on like a week-long festival of avant-garde jazz with very little money from New York City or anybody else. It's all sort of privately community supported, and they have a few private donors that help them out. But I really wanted to talk to him about his music career, because he's been making records since the 70s. And I wanted to really get her perspective on what it takes to put that event together and how it's changed over the years, and whether they consider themselves to be at all a part of the broader festival ecosystem, which they really don't. Okay. They don't even consider themselves part of the New York Jazz Festival community, because the Newport and places like that just totally ignore them. And so they've just kind of existed on their own for all this time, totally independent,
completely doing their own thing.
Exactly. They live in their own little world, which is cool.
That's a lot of fun to learn about. I also saw you talk to Dave Holland recently, and Buster Williams, which a lot of people might know because he did so much work with Herbie.
Yeah. The Dave Holland one, I was really surprised. That's one of my most popular episodes. And which is great, because he's a genius. He's done so many things over the years in all sorts of things. I mean, from working with Miles Davis to leading super avant-garde groups with Anthony Braxton and Sam Rivers to all kinds of stuff, And so it was great that there was such a huge response for that one. Yeah. And the Buster Williams one is fantastic too, because that guy has made so many records, like hundreds and hundreds of records, and has so many great stories in that podcast. Like he talks about, hanging out at Sammy Davis Jr.'s house and stuff like that. And that's why I like talking to those guys that have been around for a million years, because you really get a sense of what it's like to make a living as a musician for 40, 50 years.
A working musician throughout all the years. And they're also sitting on a lot of stories as well.
Exactly. And it's always a weird balance to me, because what I do, a lot of my research involves going on Discogs and looking at all the different albums that these guys have played on. And then I'll find some that strike me as really interesting. And when I ask them, hey, what about this record? And they'll be like, oh yeah, let me tell you about what happened that day. And there's so many times there's a fascinating story.
Associated with it. What is your background? Because I mean, your jazz knowledge is for lack of a better word, astounding.
I've been writing about music since '96 for money. And since I was a kid, basically, like I started I knew I was going to be a writer from the time I was about 12 years old.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of, started to get paid for it about 21, 22 years ago.
Yep.
And I've written for Jazz Is, I've written for Downbeat, I've written a lot for The Wire out of England.
Yep.
And this is just kind of my passion project. I do it, totally for fun. And it's really kind of astonishing. I have one of the worst cases of imposter syndrome you'll ever encounter because I go to jazz clubs and I meet people and I say hello and everybody's like, "Oh, I listened to your show, or I've read your stuff and whatever," and I'm like, "Really? People pay attention?"
Hey,
I'm always shocked.
When you're writing for that long, you're learning the whole time. I mean, you just wake up one day and you are an expert, and it shows, and your passion shows in this podcast. I mean, I truly love it, and I love the website as well. So I'm really, really happy to kind of shine a light on it here and have you on. So thank you so much.
Thank you, man. Thanks a lot.
Of course.
And and I really enjoy yours as well because you cover such a broad range of different types of artists, like writers and TV people, and all kinds of things. And I think that's great because within the music world, you kind of lose track of the other art forms, and people don't understand how the creative path works in those other areas. So that's what I'm always interested to learn more about.
Oh, cool.
So,
well, we'll keep pumping them out. I would like to say that, we kind of have a little something for everybody. And, I like to, anytime I'm interested in it, no matter, art, independent, whatever it is, I like to, go out and try to find the person, talk about it. So it's great. So thank you once again. I really appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely, man. Thanks a lot.
All right. Check out Broken Ambulance Podcast. And now it is time to talk some Dead because, as I said earlier as well, the Osiris Podcast Network has a couple great Grateful Dead podcasts, and we're going to talk about two back to back. The first one is called Broke Down Podcast. Broke Down Podcast is dedicated to exploring the music and history of the Grateful Dead. Hosted by Jonathan Hart, a co-host of Helpin' Friendly Pod, this podcast dives deeply into the Dead, one episode at a time. Jonathan weaves in the context and culture of the time and includes lots of great Dead music as well. I talked to Jonathan about it, and here's how that went down. Jonathan, thank you so much for being here and part of this Osiris extravaganza, as I'm calling it. Hey, I love the podcast. I love both your podcasts. I like you're part of the Helpin' Friendly Pod as well. But Broke Down Pod, it's where I'm getting all my Dead music these days. It's got so much. Well, you know what? Can you just tell us what Broke Down Pod has to offer?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on as well, and for saying those kind things. Broke Down Podcast is really just an excuse for me to play and listen to more and more Grateful Dead. Mm-hmm. So it's roughly twice a month. I hesitate to say bi-weekly. Yeah. I'll take a week off. There's 5 weeks in the month, whatever. And mostly because I have another podcast day job. But the gist is that if it's just me, and a lot of the episodes are just myself, I will try to strike a theme and mix together some Grateful Dead music from across the history of the band. And I, have guests, and we either dig into a specific theme together, or I talk to them, had musicians on, or I have some coming up, and talk to them about their work as well as their interest in Grateful Dead and their what they love about the band or what eras they love, and try to play some stuff from that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I listened to your last one. What was the Summer Tour Sampler, which was awesome, and just you included music, Dead and Company music, Phil Lesh, and then the Summer Jams one, and then you had a recent one with Phil Cook, which was fantastic. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, thanks. So Phil was a kind of an exciting get, if you will, to use the lingo, but I've been a fan of his work for a long time, and I knew that he had a little bit of a background as a fan of the Dead as well as of Phish, and he grew up, his father was a Deadhead, and we got into that a little bit and talked a little bit about the kind of stuff that he enjoyed, and went into some music that I think just complemented the work that he's doing nowadays.
Yeah.
He's a really, charming guy, and his latest record is really fabulous.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of His Golden Messenger, and he's been involved with some work with them, which was cool. And I enjoyed your the Oregon Trail ones. Who were you with on that one? Jeff Conklin, is that right?
Right, that's Jeff Conklin. He's a DJ at WFMU, which is New York City area radio, listener-supported radio.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody should check them out. It's a great station, and they're doing real free-form radio. And Jeff, he usually tucks some Grateful Dead into his sets, along with a lot of new and interesting music that I really love, and I've been listening to his show for a while. And, at some point we were talking on Twitter about Grateful Dead, and I was like, you should come on my show.
Yeah.
And it was great. He wanted to talk about Grateful Dead shows in Oregon.
Yep.
And we mined up a whole bunch of material. There's way more. We just skimmed the surface, really, and put together some really good episodes. And one of those is, I think, my most downloaded episode.
Yeah, the reason I brought them up is they were fantastic episodes, and it kind of highlighted how much, how the great music that has occurred in that state from the Grateful Dead, which was really cool. And I was looking at that when the Dead Company just kind of went through there. And so there's a lot of mentions of all that music that occurred, and it's pretty phenomenal, everything that happened there.
Yeah, I think they. I didn't play it when I played some Dead and Company on the most recent episode. I didn't play this because I didn't have a good source available the day when I was putting together. But I kind of wanted to get into their Dark Star into El Paso they played in Eugene, because I felt like that was a nod to the show from 1972, the Bonita Show, which is one of my all-time favorites.
I think, did you tweet about that comparison? I read that same thing what you just said somewhere as well. But
I honestly don't know if I did at this point.
That's a fantastic answer.
I thought about it, but I don't know if I wrote it down.
I love your new logo. I'd like to shout it out. People, when they check out the podcast, check out the logo, which you can get at brokedownpodcast.blogspot.com. That's really awesome what you did there. So I want to ask you real quick, kind of, you're 23 episodes in. The Grateful Dead have such an expansive catalog. What's forthcoming? You got a lot of fun ahead of you.
There's possibly an endless list of things that we could do, but Absolutely. I've got some good guests coming up.
Oh, great.
Actually, on the 24th, I've got a short interview with Tom Constantin, keyboardist from Grateful Dead, and a musician who records under the name Prana Crafter. It's Lil Soul, but his records are under Prana Crafter, and he's a Dead fan since his teen years, and we kind of talk about what he listens to, play some really good selections.
Awesome.
And then I've got a bunch of other good guests lined up. I'm going to bring back my friend Andy, who's been on a couple of the episodes. We dug into fall 72 or September 72 once before, and did some an episode on random venues that the band went through. We've got something good cooking up for the fall.
Nice. I'm really looking forward to where this goes. Like I said, there's so much to get to. Hey, thanks for your support for Welcome to the Party, pal. I really appreciate it. It's obviously the Phish, Dead is your passion, obviously, from your podcast, but you're a film buff as well.
Yeah, film, television. I try to take in a lot of stuff, and you guys, I really like what you're doing. And I will say, I also mentioned your Across the Margin episode on John Perry Barlow, because of course, we're all talking about that book at some point in the past month or two. And
did you dig into
I
it?
just read it.
Did you read it? Oh, cool! It's amazing.
I had just read it, and you guys had just dropped your episode talking about it, so I really enjoyed that.
Well, thanks for spreading the word. I can't get over the life he lived. It's just remarkable. But hey, thank you so much for coming on. I'm glad to shine a light on Broke Down Podcast, and look forward to see what you got coming next.
Thanks for having me on, and keep listening.
Absolutely. So that's the Broke Down podcast with Jonathan Hart. Check it out, Tunes for Days. So let's keep it going with the Grateful Dead. Next, I want to talk about the podcast that is Strangers Stopping Strangers. Strangers Stopping Strangers is a podcast adventure within the Deadhead community to discuss music, how it shaped us in the past and today, with connections to songs, shows, and people. So I got a chance to talk to Stacy Smith, who is the host of the podcast, and this is what she told me about it. Stacy, thank you for taking the time to come on the podcast. Love your podcast. Can you tell us about Strangers Stopping Strangers?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for welcoming to your show to talk a little bit about it. Yep. And so Strangers Stopping Strangers, I started making Strangers Stopping Strangers in, my first episode was in June of 2016. And it's kind of a nutty story. Like many, at the Dead and Company out and about, I consider myself a bit of a born-again Deadhead, a hardcore Deadhead from the 80s that, the music always lived in my heart, but, your life moves on. And Fare Thee Well came and I think shook up a lot of emotions and feelings, which I did not make, but, it definitely, came about. And when I saw the Dead and Company play in December of 2015, I was home. I went in Worcester, and I was with a work friend, and I turned to him and said, "Oh my God, I know and love more about the Dead than I've ever learned about my industry." Right? I'm home singing every lyric to my heart.
This is it,
This is it. I'm back home. So later that winter, I said, I want to get in the conversation. There was all kinds of Facebook groups and chat and things going on, and I wanted to be more than just, a comment on a Facebook log. And so I didn't know what to do. And a very good friend of mine, Wendy, who I went to Israel with when I was 16 and was one of my very first Deadhead girlfriends, who's still one of my best friends, she said, you love music and you're a salesperson. You never stop talking. You should do something with that. Like, you're a chatty who loves talking about music. You should do a documentary.
A microphone in front of Stacy.
Yeah. And she said, you should do a documentary. And I was like, oh yeah, sure. Because I have no money, a full-time job, and 2 kids, and know nothing about making a documentary. But a podcast was drilled down from that, and to be totally honest, I had never even listened to a podcast. I mean, so nuts. I didn't even know what an MP3 was.
That's crazy. That's nuts.
Yeah, but somehow podcasts, they were in the ether. I wasn't a listener, but I was like, all right, that's tangible. And I ended up sending a letter to Dennis McNally, who used to be the Grateful Dead's publicist and has been a guest on a few podcasts. And he was so gracious. He emailed me back and said, sure, I'll take a few minutes to talk to you. And I like to call him my Dumbo feather, in classic Grateful Dead family form. I mean, he didn't really do anything, but he just said, go for it, girl.
That's awesome. Yeah.
He just said, yeah, you seem passionate. You have an outgoing personality. Why not? Go for it. Do it.
It definitely seems like a perfect fit. And, your passion is obvious in all these episodes. And I just want to touch on some of these episodes. Do you want to talk about what type of guests you have on? Because I thought it was such when going through all the episodes, such an eclectic mix of people.
And that's it. It is and always will remain an eclectic mix of people because, strangers stopping strangers. I mean, that's the thing that's so beautiful about the Dead community is, we're everyone. We're everywhere. And, my podcast, my first 16-year-old guest was Ian Bernstein, 2 summers ago. I think he was on it was on August 2nd because he was so excited to be on Jerry's birthday. Yeah. And this kid had never seen a live show. And his music picks were like crazy 1967, like Avalon ballroom shit, right?
Wow.
Like he knew
his shit. Yeah.
More than I did at the time, I mean, I thought he was 50, Ian Bernstein. I was shocked that he was a 16-year-old boy.
Good on him.
And to Geraldine Brandelize, who, used to be, dating Mickey Hart and living on the ranch, and Susanna Millman, Dennis's wife. So, and everybody else, the English Deadhead, the Australian Deadhead, the women, to me, it's just the cumulative mix. And I love that there's so many different podcast now, talking to so many different people. And to me, it's a voice of the community. You know, when I feel like they have something interesting and different to offer, I want it to be everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you do. I mean, shows your podcast shows how Deadheads really come from all walks of life. I mean, your most recent one, you spoke with a sports writer.
I did, yeah, Eric Elrod, and that was so cool. Like, I meet so many people on social media, and he had a little blue check mark, and that always makes me be like, who's this official person I'm talking to? Right, like, you're official, who are you? And yeah, he's a sportscaster. I mean, and we had so much fun talking and connecting, and so, yeah, I feel like, you know, no matter who you are, you know, you get out and start talking about the Dead, and then we just all become like that nerdy Deadhead, you know, talking about, you know, this show and that riff yeah. So I mean, it's just the next one that's coming out. I've taken it back a little bit because I've been on the road a lot, shaking a lot of hands.
Just finished Dead and Company tour.
I did. I went to 8 shows, which was tremendous. And the next one coming out is the 21st Century Deadhead Girls, because I've had 21st Century boys on, but not some of the young ladies. And the youth that you see out there, the kids, I mean, just the passing of the torch, seeing everyone from 15-year-olds to, 75-year-olds dancing side by side, shaking their bones. Yeah.
I like how you got Randy Freeman on from Woven Free. I am in the market for one of those Cats Under the Stars jean jackets. I need that. I'm going to reach out to Randy at some point.
Oh, he's so nice. I mean, everybody has been. Charlie Miller, that was probably one of my most downloaded, as a taper out there. People were real interested in his stories, but they're all so fascinating, I mean, everybody's so gracious and grateful and kind, and it's a real honor.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for shining a light on all those people, and, your podcast is great. I couldn't recommend it more, and thanks for taking some time here to talk about it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Of course. So check out Strangers Stopping Strangers. Next up, I want to talk about the Sound podcast with Ira Haberman. Listen for the secret, searching for the sound. Your voice of the jam band community, providing a forum for artists, band members, and others in the community to share their story. Ira has a great podcast, and I talked to him a little bit about it. Ira, thank you for being here. Really, really appreciate it. Absolutely love the podcast. I was wondering if you could just tell all the listeners here what is the Sound Podcast?
The Sound Podcast is a music discovery podcast, really rooted in jam band music. But not only jam band music. We really cover a wide swath of music, and it's because it's mostly, selfishly, music that interests me, and I hope that it's music that will eventually interest our listeners as well. So we pull on a wide variety of music, from Americana to funk to improv to all kinds of music, and what we hope to do is explore and introduce new music and music that's new to people to the world.
Yeah, I mean, I like that you mentioned discovery, because I mean, just going through your podcast, you had 119 episodes at this point, which is pretty awesome. And I was coming upon artists that I knew the band, but didn't know much about the artist. It was so cool. So speaking of guests, I mean, the list is, as I was referring to, pretty remarkable at this point of who you've talked to. Who are some of the artists that listeners can come upon when they listen to your podcast?
Yeah, so we have, again, because it's such a wide swath, we have people like Warren Haynes, who, is an integral part of the jam band community, whether it was his work with the Allman Brothers or Government Mule or former members of the Grateful Dead. But then we have players and people like Corey Wong, who's been a 2-time guest, who is this amazing guitar player from Minneapolis who plays in all kinds of bands, including Wolfpack, and has a solo project. So it really does kind of span, like I said earlier off the top, it really does kind of span across, for lack of a better word, across the margin of guests. And so for me, what's interesting is they all have a unique and interesting story, and this is an opportunity for them to share their story and share what they're doing and the projects that they're working on. And so it's great that Warren agreed to be on the show, but it's also great that somebody like Corey, who doesn't have as much exposure as Warren does, is on the show. And that's what we try to do. We try to, the monsters of the community, but also the up-and-comers, and then we try to achieve both in what we're doing.
Some of those under-the-radar artists are very valuable to talk to. Some of their insight is just as mammoth as some of the bigger fish, if you will. Corey Wong's story, that was the most recent podcast. That was pretty incredible. He had faced a great deal of adversity.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know if it's the adversity that drives these people, because I think if you look at all of their stories to a certain degree, they have faced either some kind of adversity or they've faced some kind of life-changing experience, and that's very much why I'm doing this podcast. So I saw the Grateful Dead in 1991 when I was 16, and I'm happy to say that I haven't gone through any adversity, but I did go through a life-changing moment, and that was the first time I saw the Grateful Dead and was exposed to just the party that was going on in the community that was involved in this music. And I hope that some of that energy transforms in some of the people that I bring to the table.
Yeah, I can tell you it surely does. I'm going to tell you, I also I went straight to the Scott Metzger interview and the Marco interview, which were done pretty early on. I actually caught Scott Metzger last night. He was playing with Skerrick and Stanton Moore and Andy Hess. It was a remarkable show, and I really recommend those episodes to anyone out there, amongst so many others. But I need to ask you this: what is your? It sounds like you're a fan. You had were really taken by the Dead show in '91 at such a young age. I can relate to that very much so. But do you have a musical background? And I ask this because you speak to all your guests, the kind of the vernacular and just you sound like such a seasoned and knowledgeable musician. Is this just from hardcore fandom, or?
Yeah, it's a combination of hardcore fandom and also I was involved in the media industry and specifically the radio industry in Canada for almost 20 years.
Oh wow! Yep.
And mostly behind the scenes. I started off really young. Like I knew at a very young age, I think I was 6, that I wanted to be in radio and be able to impart other people's stories. And so I fulfilled that dream. I worked in commercial radio when I got my first gig when I was 21, and I loved it. And so I wanted to always impart the stories. I mean, that's, and I know that that's what Across the Margin does as well, well.
Sure.
I want to impart the stories of musicians, and I think it's important to speak in the vernacular and the tone of those that I'm interviewing, but break it down so that the listener who's not familiar with that vernacular can also get a good grasp of what's going on and what's at the heart of these musicians and other artists that we've had. We've had Jay Blakesberg on the show, who's a famous photographer, and we've had writers. Joel Sullivan's been on the show. So these are monsters in their community, and we want to sort of bring them to our audience as well.
Yeah, to shine a light on that. One thing I noticed too, you have some great playlists on your website. Your website's definitely something I'd like to direct listeners to as well. I was digging into those, but your passion definitely rings through in all these episodes and your expertise. So all I can say is just keep doing what you're doing, man. This is a really great podcast, and I recommend it highly to anyone out there. So thanks for taking some time with me, man. I appreciate it.
I appreciate the time, and I appreciate Across the Margin. I love what you guys are doing as well, and I mentioned to you that I absolutely adore your website. You do it's a great site and so many insightful and thoughtful people and great stories as well. So thanks for having me on, and thanks for doing what you do. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Appreciate the kind words. That's such a great podcast, the Sound Podcast. You have to check it out. I'd like to talk about another great podcast. It's called Inside Out with hosts Seth Weiner and Rob Turner. It's a podcast about music and industry and festivals and concerts and culture. It's a mix of two perspectives. There's a fan, that's Rob, and then industry insider in Seth, and which makes up for an awesome dynamic. So I got a chance to talk to Rob and talk about the podcast, and this is what he said. Rob, thanks for joining me and joining in on this celebration of all things Osiris. I love the podcast. I was wondering, just to get started, if you could tell us a little bit about Inside Out.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on.
Of course.
It's something, my co-host Seth Weiner has been in the music industry on various levels. He works on jam crews. He organizes the work exchange team, which provides workers to festivals and that sort of thing, and other ways as well. And I've been more on the fan and journalism side.
Oh, cool.
So essentially, we explore things from each of our perspectives.
Yeah, that's a cool dynamic.
So as it works out, he tends to land the interviews. There are exceptions, and I tend to do the research for and quarterback and lead the interviews.
Nice. You guys, I mean, I was looking at, I've listened to a bunch of episodes.
Thank you.
Carl Denson's great. It's amazing. I was just looking at the list that I need to get into. You guys, you want to speak on some of the guests you've had? Because it's pretty remarkable.
Well, I have to start with Colonel Bruce Hampton,
yes.
Because when we were nobody and we had nothing to show for our career or anything, he was the very first guest to come on.
Yeah.
He also came on a little later at a time when there was a lull, and then when we were about to abandon, I mean, it was really becoming a struggle.
Oh, really?
And then he announced he and Matt Wilson and Dwayne Trucks put together the Hampton 70 at the Fox Theater.
Yeah.
And they made sure that we were the only media allowed backstage for the entire day, and we conducted interviews, and that basically breathed life into our podcast. The John Fishman interview came out of that. The John Fishman interview is what RJB heard, and RJB was the guy who called us and invited us to be one of the first podcasts on the Osiris platform, which we're very, very honored to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Same here. That's awesome. I mean, I was, beyond that, that's a cool story, how that started from Colonel Bruce. That's really cool. I saw the...
He's an amazing man, and just to get even the slightest wave of that wand in our direction might be the greatest thing that ever happened to me my entire life. And I'm anti-hyperbole. That is an actual true statement.
No, it's funny. Everyone I know who's been in his presence just describes it to me in this way. That's just it's amazing. It's really he's a remarkable human being. But yeah, so I saw Tom Hamilton's on the list. I want to dig into that. I'm actually seeing him tomorrow night. Stanton Moore was on the list. I saw him last night, actually. Kuroda's on there. I saw a Black Angels episode. I haven't listened yet, and I can't wait. I love them. Did you guys talk to Christian Bland or Stephanie Bailey? Who'd you talk to for the Black Angels?
We talked to Christian and the other frontman. His name escapes me right now.
I think it might be Alex.
It's funny you should bring that up, because that demonstrates there's a point where I fall on my face in that interview, and it's another ethos of our show.
Yep.
And something that I think is advice to podcasters in general, that I don't think podcasters are looking to listen to someone who's just trying to show everyone how smart they are.
Yeah, sure.
I don't think they want to be read to, and I don't think they want someone who has too much to prove. So their mentor, and again, the name's escaping me, but Psychedelia really started in Austin. They actually beat San Francisco to the punch, and I hadn't learned this until I did all the research for that interview.
The guy's name is escaping me as well. He put out a great Halloween album.
I mispronounced it when I brought it up.
You know what? I'm so glad to hear that, because I actually have a lot of mispronunciations of names, because usually I'm just reading them, and sometimes you've never even heard the name that you're about to say, and it can be a little embarrassing. I mean, podcasting is you're putting yourself out there a little bit.
Yeah, and the other thing is grammar. I've listened to radio since I was a kid, and I would rail on broadcasters who exhibit poor grammar, because my mom was a stickler for grammar and all that. Now I listen to my own show, and I'm doing it, and it's because you're oftentimes thinking 3 or 4 different things at once. What the person's saying, where you want to go with the conversation, what you don't want to forget about, and you the most basic things, like even the person's name, can just slip your mind.
And also there's a technical aspect. I'm also kind of working buttons and making sure everything's sounding good, and on top of that, we're all human.
That's true.
Mistakes happen. So what's forthcoming? Any podcasts you're looking forward to that you got, or what's in the hopper?
Eddie Roberts of New Master Sounds will be our next episode. Our most recent one is John Stickley, who, by the way, who I called Joe at one point. We left that in too.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Another example. You go through and you learn all about this person's career, and then you sit down in front of them and you forgot their first name. It's unbelievable.
I like that you leave it in.
But any fan of the Flecktones should be a fan of John Stickley Trio. They very much incorporate a wide variety of styles of music into their bluegrass traditional sensibility, including even punk. He used to be a punk drummer. So, I mean, they're a fantastic band. Eddie Roberts will be our next episode. One thing we want to do more is joint interviews with members of two different bands.
Yeah, oh, wow, cool.
We did it with Nick of Big Something and Mike of Voodoo Visionary, and that was fun. Big Something's a little further along the line, so it was a good way to get advice from a band, successful band, that sort of thing.
Yeah. That's cool. That's awesome. Well, I love the podcast, and that's what I was saying. I'm so excited to dig deeper in. I mean, you guys have done such great work and had so many awesome people on. So I'm going to be digging in. I think everyone out there should dig in. And thanks for taking the time to talk to me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Before I leave, your John Barlow episode is absolutely fantastic.
Oh, thanks. The subject matter was just took it to new places. I can't believe the life he lived. It's crazy.
Well, I turned it on, and then it's ending, and I'm like, oh man, that was only like 15, 20 minutes, and then, nope, it's an hour-long podcast, and it was that gripping. Very, very well done.
That's awesome. Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate that, man. That's awesome. And thanks again.
Right.
Thanks again for coming on. We'll talk soon.
Hope to meet you soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care. So that is Inside Out. Check that podcast out. I'm sure you're going to really dig it. So now we're going to wade back into fishy waters, and before I get to the next micro interview, I'd like to mention two podcasts that I didn't have a chance to talk to the host about their podcasts that are both Phish podcasts, and they're both amazing. One is Tom Marshall's podcast, Under the Scale. I mentioned Tom earlier, one of the co-founders of Osiris Media. And Tom, as most will know, he's a longtime lyricist of Phish. And so he just has such an inside view of everything. He was involved in crafting so much of what they've done throughout the years. His podcast, Under the Scales, as he writes it, Tom goes under the scales to uncover the beating heart of Phish. There's a couple recent episodes, one with Trey and one with tour manager Brad Sands, that are just must listens to. It's just an amazing podcast. Another podcast I'd like to mention is Mike Menio's The Daily Soundcheck. So what he's doing is he's going through chronologically, playing every single one of Phish's sound checks and kind of discussing them and talking about what they mean in the time period they were played. And it's another awesome Phish podcast. So the next podcast I want to talk about is called Female Centrics. It's a podcast that discusses all things Phish from a female point of view, and this is a point of view you haven't got a lot of. It's a smaller community within this community, and so the host is Dawn, who we're about to hear a conversation with, and so I think what she's doing is very important and tons of fun. Here's my conversation with Dawn. So Dawn, thank you so much for taking the time coming on the podcast. Please tell me about Female Centrics. I love it.
All right. Well, thank you for having me as well.
Of course.
Female Centrics is the first female-hosted Phish community podcast.
About time.
And
yep.
Yeah, we're filling a niche here, which before was mentioned to me by Tom. Of course I know about, that's much more of a, men are much more prevalent in there, with the classic Sausage Factory, haha.
Sausage Fest, yep.
Yeah, thank you, Factory Fest. And so when I was going to be on Under the Scales for a book project that I was putting together of tour stories, but then I connected back with Tom saying, hey, why don't we make this about the women fan base, because Phish Chicks is getting so big, and Sophia with Bethany Barker and Sophia Callisto is doing this really amazing photographic anthology book. And he got back to me and told me about Osiris and said, well, I think you should do the first female-hosted Phish podcast. And so I sat there for a couple minutes, and I'm like, well, you don't say no to Tom Marshall after this.
Absolutely not. Yep.
So I'm like, sure, let's do it. And then, I really, really lucked out that I have a very good friend of mine, Ryan, who has all the equipment, is wicked at really great, tech, and he loves podcasts. And so I told him what I was doing, and he has taken it on. And then my husband made up our fun little game show, the Market Price. So it's great for him to be involved with this too, because it does take a lot of time. So it's nice that we're able to kind of do this together in that sense.
What is Market Price?
So Market Price is, yes, we have coined it everyone's favorite Phish game show. Yep. And so what we do is we will interview somebody from the community, which I can talk about that in a moment, mm-hmm. and then afterwards we play this game. And how it works is he picks out 10 one-minute clips of a live song throughout the 30, what do we have, 5 years this year or something?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And we have to listen to them for that 1 minute, and in that 1 minute, so this is the Price is Right rules. So we have to guess what the date is, and whoever guesses closest without going over wins whatever. I keep saying
that
jewels.
Sounds fun. I want in. That sounds cool.
Yes. Well, that's what it is too. So I definitely, we'll set it up for you to be able to do a call-in sometime, because it's a tricky game. I'm getting a little bit better on it, but it's either I'm off by a smidge, or I'm off by 13 years.
Yeah.
It's completely, we're just not.
It's nowhere in between. So you've had some fascinating guests on. Can you speak for a minute of some of the people you've welcomed into your studio?
Yeah, sure. So, I connected first with Bethany Barker, who runs Phish Chicks, and she was our first episode there. And then we had Sophia Callisto was one of them, who is creating a book called, or at least a project right now. I think the name of the book at the end is going to be different, but it's called Music Empowering Women. And essentially what she's done is she created a questionnaire for Phish fans, for women Phish fans, and we filled them out, and then she matched us with songs or themes. And she created full portfolios, so the costumes, the makeup, the background, whatever it is that she wants to do these photo shoots with. Mm-hmm. And so for my own song, she chose Free, which was just great. My daughter was born to Free, and I just absolutely love that song. So, but she ended up starting the first thing. She kicked it off in the White Sands Dunes in New Mexico. And in May. And so it was 15, 16 of us, I believe. I think it was 10 in the actual photo shoot that all got together, never met each other, and of course within 24 hours we were a total tribe. Yep. And
I saw the pic. It was amazing.
What?
I saw the pic. It's amazing.
Yes, definitely. So her, and then I had Hannah Dupin from Cash or Trade on.
I love the Phish Academia episode where you talk to Dr. Jenkins, who teaches a course called Philosophy School of Phish. Am I right about that name? Yep. But how cool is that? So there's a mandatory attendance of 3 shows, Couch or Live, and a field trip to the Gorge. I need in on this class. How cool is that?
Yes, I know. I was I can't, and it's a third level, a third year level. It's much more of an advanced philosophy class. It's not it's not a freshman class. And from what I know of, I just I haven't had a chance to touch base back with her, but they did a big gathering at the Gorge where Denise Goldman came, and she also, because she's doing a big project on, again, the women Phish Bays, and kind of basing it off of the community aspect that's going on with Phish Chicks.
Yep.
So so she was great, and then Mark Filoramo, who made that super adorable the musical at his school.
Oh yes, that's right. Yep.
Yeah. So he rewrote a whole. He not rewrote it. He wrote an entire musical and had his 5th grade class sing all these songs. And so that was really
That's
great.
fun. It's cool to give him that platform as well. So anyone coming up soon? Any episodes in the hopper?
Yep. So we just finished my last week. We had Jenny Gold. I feel like I'm forgetting someone here. So I'm actually just going to pull up my page real quick. So of course I don't want to forget to mention anybody. Yep. We did, but the last one we just had was Jenny Chadbourne on, and Jenny has just been part of the scene since '94. She's been to over 400 shows, and so we just talked, and it ended up being that her Phish life, as you call it, was just so fascinating that I was like, I don't want to rush through this, and it ended up being sort of the part one of the whole thing.
Yeah, get her back, of course.
Yeah. Oh, and of course, how did I forget is Kelly Morris, who does the Be More Now film projects.
Awesome.
So she did that More project, and she's done a few with
I love that.
She's also filming Stephanie Jenkins' journey with this Phish Academia. So,
cool.
And then next week, I'm pretty psyched because we just had for the first time, all of this has been through Skype.
Yeah.
And so for the first time in our actual studio, we had Carl Gerhard, who is the trumpet player from Giant Country Horns, come to visit.
Absolutely. That's huge. I'm really happy for you guys on that, and I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah, I'm pumped. I'm pumped,
that's
definitely.
awesome. Well, keep doing what you're doing. I think it's such a valuable voice you're providing. The podcast is a ton of fun, so just keep rocking it. And thanks for coming on.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. Appreciate you having me.
Of course. So that is Female Centrics. I love what Dawn's doing. Check it out. The next podcast I'm going to talk about is called Beyond the Pond. It is a Phish-related podcast, but it's also so much more. It's hosted by 2 Phish fans, Brian Brinkman and Dave Goldstein. Beyond the Pond introduces listeners to a vast array of bands and artists, starting with specific pieces of Phish improvisation. So there's a lot of discovery in this podcast, and just a whole wide variety of music. So I talked to Brian about the podcast, and here is our conversation. So, hey, thanks for taking the time, Brian. I love the podcast. It is right up my alley, and let's just dive right in. Can you just describe to us what is awaiting listeners beyond the pond?
Yeah, absolutely, and thanks so much for having me on, Mike. This is really awesome for me. So Beyond the Pond kind of started out of conversations that I was having with David Goldstein in the winter of my co-host, in the winter of 2017, and basically we both knew individually we wanted to start a podcast. We talked about Phish a lot. We engaged with other Phish fans a ton. We listened to a lot of Phish, but one thing Dave and I had in common was this love for music, both in the classic rock world, both in jazz and hip hop, in indie rock especially. And we wanted to figure out a way to kind of bridge those two interests. And what we ultimately came to was this idea that when we listen to very specific Phish improvisational pieces, it not only, blows us away from a Phish standpoint in terms of what the band's able to do musical connection-wise, what their talent level is, how they're able to, engage this audience over a 15 to 30 to 40-minute period in time and keep people really interested, but also how that kind of reminds us and intrigues us about other music. And so we started really small. We focused our first episode just to see if we could do this, really. We didn't know if it would actually work, if we could tie these lines together. We explored the Chalk Dust Torture from July 10th, 1999 in Camden, New Jersey.
It's just had a nice anniversary. That's a special one for me as well.
That was one of the first jams. I remember I got into Phish in 2001, right before the Live Phish series came out. And I remember when that Live Phish 08, that set came out. And I remember hearing that Chalk Dust Torture, and I was very familiar, obviously, with Chalk Dust Torture at that time. It's like one of the first Phish songs you ever hear.
Yeah, sure.
And I was like, what in the world is going on here? This is the most beautiful music.
Absolutely. Those tones are something that really resonate with me. It's amazing.
Yeah, Trey just seems to like channel something, really spiritual in that jam. And Dave and I sat down and rattled off like 15 songs and 15 bands that we wanted to feature. And what we kind of figured out from there was, if we take a specific moment in Phish improvisation, and if we allow ourselves 15 minutes in a podcast to nerd out on a Phish show and kind of a Phish run and the song that is in question, like great versions of it, we can then, through the jam and through specific themes that we kind of figure out are going on within the jam, we can introduce people to music that both we're interested in, that we're learning about, that we're really excited about by way of a specific Phish jam. So it's really grown from that.
Yeah, I love that idea, that bridging the gap and, the melding of worlds you guys do. I mean, you obviously know your Phish, so I got to commend your choices of the jams. The Riverport Gin comes to mind, the Magna Caspian, Knoxville Mike's as the more recent ones, but great choices there. But
thank you.
To speak, what could a few recent episodes, can you kind of put us on to what you've been talking about of late?
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of split our episodes into what we call like the traditional DTP episode, which is we take a very specific Phish jam, break that down, and then introduce listeners to 4 to 5 artists based off of it, and then like more widespread interviews with writers and thinkers within both the Phish community and outside of it. But recently we've put out some really cool episodes that I'm particularly proud of. So we're recording this right after Phish tour started, summer 2018. The day that it started, we released an episode on the Gumbo from Deer Creek, July 22nd, 2003, a first set jam that's a particular favorite of mine, and we focused on that. We went really indulgent here. It's a summer episode. It's a fun episode. We focused on guitar solos, like really heroic, really shimmery guitar solos, and then summertime albums. And we talked about the War on Drugs, Stone Roses, the Hold Steady, and Hot Chips, some 4 bands that are really like big capstone bands for us.
Absolutely. Fun summer rockers too. All 4 of those,
all big rockers. Absolutely. Recently, we talked as well about the 2001 from Memphis, Tennessee in September 99. We talked about kind of funk in that episode as well as Memphis blues. We did a feature on the Runaway Jim from Walnut Creek Amphitheater on June 16th, 1995, which is a really just mesmerizing peek into what Phish was doing in June 95, where they kind of said, screw it to whatever the audience wants. We're just going to like jam like we're
going to do us. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
And we talked a lot about we talked a lot about like instrumental music, as well as kind of the impact of the piano on Phish. And so we talked about some piano-led artists. We talked about how Trey kind of channeled his guitar as this like vehicle for interstellar exploration.
Yeah. Well put.
But another one that I'm really proud of, we talked about the Down with Disease from September 12th, 2000, which I've never heard a ton about. And when we listened to it reminded us that we'd never really focused on Mike Gordon in one of our episodes. And so we spent a lot of the episode talking about the bass and talking about the impact of the bass on Phish's jamming. And we focused on a couple of artists that really utilize the bass in a really profound way to push forward their own songwriting, as well as obviously that jam came towards the end of the 1.0 era of Phish. So we talked about bands that kind of broke up and what their final period was before they broke up and how it kind of resonated with their overall career. So those are kind of like a little different to like what we've done recently.
That's awesome. What you guys do so good, and I'm sure it's kind of the point of what you do is allow for a lot of discovery, and that's really cool. I think you're introducing a lot of people to music and in the community, and I think you're providing a great service in that way, which I really, really respect. I saw you had had an episode on Bourdain, which I think is amazing. He's special. I wrote an article about him. But you also had a recent one about top albums. And before I let you go, I want to ask if you could mention some of your top albums from this year so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to. We do 2 episodes a year where we break down our favorite albums of the year in the first half of the year and then kind of overall. Mm-hmm. And for me this year, my top 5 so far are Casey Musgrave's Golden Hour. I think it's a really beautiful mix of country and pop, and I think what she's doing is just fascinating.
Yeah, some good stuff there.
Really is. Jeff Rosenstock's Post, which was, I think, the first album to come out in 2018, and is
track, USA is unbelievable.
Oh my God, it's like everything that I internally feel about the world right now.
Unbelievable, yeah.
Father John Misty's God's Favorite Customer, an artist I've always jumped back and forth with, but I really feel like he's doing some sincere stuff on this record, and as a young father, as a husband, it just really reflects with kind of where I'm at in life. Yeah. Parquet Court's Wide Awake. I think it's reminds me of just kind of a raw Kinks type of record, and it just kind of gives me everything that I want. And then surprise for me, I've always loved Beach House, but their most recent record, 7, has really blown me away in a way that I just didn't expect. And it's kind of a left turn while also retaining the really amazing aspects of their sound that I just love.
Yeah, there's a couple tracks in there. You almost forget you're listening to Beach House, which is kind of cool.
It really is. It really is. And I would be... I should just note this came out after we released the episode, but it's an album that Dave and I are both thrilled by. It's the new Rolling Blackouts Coastal Fever record that I would recommend to everyone who listens to us, who's into kind of Phish guitar wizardry, to check out.
Wow, I haven't dug into that yet, so you just put me onto it. So and that's what you guys do. So hey, thank you for taking the time. I was excited to shine a light on Beyond the Pond, and I appreciate you being here, man. Appreciate it.
I really appreciate you giving me some time here, Mike. This is awesome, man. Thank you so much.
Of course. So that is Beyond the Pond. You can see how much fun that podcast could be, and how much music they have to discuss over there. Now I want to talk about the Bluest tape. It's a widespread Panic podcast, and you didn't think Osiris was going to leave Panic out of the mix, I'm sure. So it is a podcast journey through their live catalog and discussion of the band all the way back from Athens, Georgia, their early days there. Its hosts are Harvey Couch and Jeff Kalath, and I talked to Harvey, and he told me a little bit about the podcast. So Harvey, thank you so much for joining me today. I've been listened to a bunch of the podcasts. It is excellent. Can you tell us what the Bluest tape is all about?
For sure. I appreciate the time, man.
Of course.
Yeah, so me and my buddy Jeff, we have been sharing sort of this love of Widespread Panic since, back in the days when we used to send cassette tapes to each other.
Absolutely.
And we never lived in the same place. He was from Wisconsin and I lived in Kentucky. Mm-hmm. He lives in Memphis now. But we would get on the phone, every couple of weeks and just sort of talk about the stuff that we've been listening to and just sort of catch up. And they got to a point where it was like, well, we're having these conversations, like maybe other people would want to listen to it. So
let's record this, yeah.
Right. And so that was sort of the genesis of it, and just sort of a way to kind of rediscover the library. I mean, it's such a significant, sort of archive of these live recordings, and it was just sort of an excuse to kind of find different entrance points. And so that's sort of what we do every week. Hopefully every week, is come up with sort of a theme or an idea to kind of look into different shows and different time, different eras and different approaches to the music, because obviously they did a great job of keeping things fresh and changing things up, and so that's sort of what we try to do.
It's a vast catalog at this point as well. So hey, if I'm right, I saw on Twitter, happy 25th anniversary for your first show.
Yeah, right. That was yesterday,
so,
which was wild.
That was